Good afternoon and welcome to Matters Financial and Geopolitical from a Frontier. My article over the weekend was called The New Economy of Anger. The real-time feed is a 21st century Netflix and is both unputdownable and incendiary. From Chile, where protesters burned down the headquarters of Enel, the electricity generating company, after a proposed price increase, and a state of emergency has been imposed there. All over Latin America, from Peru to Ecuador to Haiti to Honduras, demonstrators have taken to the streets. The IMF cut the projected economic growth rate for Latin America from 1.4% to 0.6%. citing domestic policies and the US-China trade war, and clearly nose-diving economic opportunities creating tinder-dry conditions. Of course, no country is as extreme as Venezuela, where GDP is down from $350 billion in 2012 to an estimated $60 billion in 2019. People have been pushed to the edge and are taking to the streets. Paul Virilio pronounced in his book Speed and Politics, the revolutionary contingent attains its ideal form not in the place of production, but in the street, where for a moment it stops being a cog in the technical machine and itself becomes a motor, machine of attack. In other words, a producer of speed. This phenomenon about which I'm speaking is not limited to Latin America. We have recently witnessed the WhatsApp revolution in Lebanon, where a proposed tax on WhatsApp calls sent up to 17% of the Lebanese population into the street. Iraq is on a knife edge. Millions of Algerians sent the wheelchair-bound Bouteflika home not too long ago. Hong Kong remains in open rebellion and trying to shake off the crusher of bones, Xi Jinping, and his algorithmic control. The phenomenon is spreading like wildfire, in large part because of the tinder-dry conditions underfoot. Prolonged standoffs eviscerate economies, reducing opportunities and accelerate the negative feedback loop. Antonio Gramsci wrote, "The crisis consists precisely in the fact that the old is dying and the new cannot be born. In this interregnum, a great variety of morbid symptoms appear. Now is the time of monsters." This level of unhappiness is unprecedented in a time of peace, and in a time when our august financial institutions keep touting about how it has never been so good for the human race. Dr. Celestine Monga, in a recent piece, characterized the situation thus: the great discordance. The planet is filled with rage and anger. The new economy of anger and discontent levels around the world are high despite the fact that most available indicators of political and economic progress are better than they have ever been. Leadership in the 21st century has become nationalistic and jingoistic. Horizons have been narrowed. President Trump is not John F. Kennedy, ich bin ein Berliner. Xi Jinping is all about Han China. Narendra Modi is all about the Hindutva. Boris is all about Brexit. In Africa, other than the Nobel Prize winner Abiy, who else is sketching out a horizon? Today's leadership does not appreciate the humanity of all its citizens. How can they appreciate the humanity of the world? Or as Marshall McLuhan once put it, there are no passengers on the spaceship Earth, we are all crew. Richard Kapuscinski wrote, revolution must be distinguished from revolt, coup d'etat, palace takeover. A coup or a palace takeover may be planned, but a revolution never. Its outbreak, the hour of that outbreak, takes everyone, even those who've been striving for it, unawares. They stand amazed at the spontaneity that appears suddenly and destroys everything in its path. It demolishes so ruthlessly that in the end it may annihilate the ideals that called it into being. This is a revolution, and it is a global phenomenon. Kapuscinski also said, if the crowd disperses, goes home, does not reassemble, we say the revolution is over. It is not over. More and more people are gathering in the streets, unless we're now going to Xinjiang the whole world. And I reference an article in Haaretz. 1 million people are jailed at China's gulags. I managed to escape. Here's what's really going on inside. Children are being taken from their parents, who are confined in concentration camps and being put in Chinese orphanages, he says. Women in the camps are receiving inoculations that make them infertile. The current modus operandi is running on empty. Macro thoughts, the currency, this is sterling, even breached $1.30 for the first time in Boris Johnson's wild ride as Prime Minister. We're currently at 129.62 trading. Sterling's gains, according to John Authers, should remain intact, but there may be many more months of fractious political debate before it can appreciate further. Crude oil, I saw this tweet in Arabic from Al Jazeera breaking, and it's something for the oil markets to consider. It said that basically the Saudis have identified the Iranians as the authors of the attack on Aramco and are looking at how they are going to react. This is something the oil markets need to consider. The Speaker in the United Kingdom Parliament said a motion on the deal had already been brought before MPs on Saturday, and it would be repetitive and disorderly to debate it again. That was yesterday. The Letwin amendment went through 322 versus 306. I came across a short clip by Alan Bastard. The elimination of restrictive employment legislation, quite simply, we don't need any. When was this country the leading industrial power in the world? When we sent children up chimneys, women down mines, and trade unionists to Australia. He really was very good. We had previously very extreme positioning in sterling, and hence that's given fuel to the short covering rally. I follow somebody called FX Pip Titan, who does the most delectable and delicious charts, and he tweeted Satoshi Nakamoto and the creation of Bitcoin, in my opinion, was a secret government-backed project made to look like the People's Project in order to get the masses to buy into the whole Bitcoin blockchain push for what many incorrectly called greater freedoms. Home Thoughts, Autumn in Manhattan. This is a lovely photograph from Therese Jen, whose photography is so spectacularly good, and whom I look forward to meeting eventually and one day. And that took me to John Keats, to autumn, seasons of mists and mellow fruitfulness, close bosom friend of the maturing sun, conspiring with him how to load and bless with fruit the vines that round the thatch eaves run, to bend with apples the mossed cottage trees, to fill all fruit with ripeness to the core, to swell the gourd and plump the hazel shells, with a sweet kernel to set budding more and still more, Later flowers for the bees until they think warm days will never cease, for summer has o'erbrimmed their clammy cells. That's just the first paragraph, but it's a beautiful poem. Caught on camera, a male elephant walks alone along a well-trodden animal pathway, the Sheldrick Trust. She always tells me to smile and put on a happy face. She says I was put here to spread joy and laughter. I found that component of the Joker very powerful. That was great, Arthur. Thank you. I mean, I loved hearing what you had to say. It made my day. Thanks, Murray. He's imagining this. But you know, the stuff, the lights, the show, the audience, all that stuff, I'd give it all up in a heartbeat to have a kid like you. That's his imagination. American artist Richard Serra's Inside Out 2013 is in the Saatchi Gallery, which is a lovely place to visit if you're in London, as is The End of Summer 2015 Victoria Seamer. Explores fractured landscapes through photo manipulations and collages. This is Hope 1998 Ed Ruscha. I know what it doesn't take to be an artist, and that is the need to follow rules. It might be a struggle, but you have to follow a path of your own creation, indeed. And that took me to the man from Hope, Bill Clinton. Mark Rothko, Untitled. This is from the Tate Modern, and I haven't seen this one before. By the late 40s, he developed a style in which hazy, luminous rectangles float within a vertical format. And finally, this one's from Kenya, Bamburi Beach, Heavenly Sunrise on Bamburi Beach. Photos by Beata Bernat. Political reflections. It was incredible. Justin Trudeau won again, but at the head of a minority government this time. But the more I thought about it, with the whole blackface and all that sort of very negative propaganda, and I think what has transpired is the Chinese ran a sophisticated influence program against him, in point of fact. Lebanon, I live for this. This is from NX Beale. It's pretty incredible. 17% of the population. Zero hedge. Israel lost the prospect of a Kurdish state, Rojava, as an ally. This dream has gone now for many decades to come, and with it the partition of Syria and Iraq. And that is the consequence of Trump's knee-jerk decision. The Kurds in this video are seen throwing tomatoes at retreating American troops that are leaving them to be slaughtered by Turks. Inside the battle for Hong Kong was a long piece in the Financial Times. During Umbrella, we didn't escalate our protests, so we failed. It was stupid. We sat holding hands, waiting for the police to take us away one by one. It's kind of funny to look back on it now, he says. We believed in the system then. We thought our votes could make a difference, but now we've learned the system is stacked against us. So we've become less peaceful. We've lost patience. Everyone knows that in reality the protesters' actual foe is China, a bristling superpower with the world's largest army and a furious leadership that has likened the demonstrations to terrorism. If we burn, you burn with us has been one of their rallying cries. I don't think the Hong Kong people stand a chance of winning against the government. They're experts, they have the resources, it's not a fair fight. The Chinese Communist Party values Hong Kong as an international financial center and a gateway connecting China and the world, but I think that is now ended. Opinion polls show the number of people identifying as Hong Kongers rather than Chinese has hit record highs. If we burn, you burn with us. In early October, Wu and I met by the harbour. The seed has been planted. He looks around to make sure no one else is listening. We're heading towards civil war. Estimated 2 million people marched in protest to the proposed extradition bill on June 16, one of the largest protests in Hong Kong's history. I've written about this severally. I've said Xi is building an algorithmic society. Unity is iron and steel. Unity is a source of strength. Complete reunification of the motherland is an inevitable trend. No one and no force can ever stop it, he said. The folks in Hong Kong whom Xi is seeking to unmask so he can exercise algorithmic control over them are in open rebellion. Joshua Wong told German media Hong Kong ist das neue Berlin. The Chinese dream has become a nightmare at the boundaries of the Han Empire. And as I've written before, the frontier from Xinjiang to Kashmir, from Gaza to Crimea, from Hong Kong to Taiwan, are 21st century flashpoints, and it's spreading. Of course, there are many other frontiers, the Mediterranean Sea, the Sahara Desert Islands, because of the EEZs they control. I said previously it is not possible to Xinjiang Hong Kong, I think. I referenced an article by Dr. Celestine Monga, the interim balance sheet of democracy, a Machiavellian memo, Celestine Monga, University of Paris and Peking University. He talks about the disposition matrix, a name that even George Orwell could not have imagined in his famous novel of 1984. This is what Obama and his team used to meet once a week. President's underlings compile their proposed lists of who should be executed, and the president, at a charming weekly event dubbed by the White House aides as Terror Tuesday, then chooses from baseball cards and decrees in total secrecy who should die. The power of accuser, prosecutor, judge, jury, and executioner all consolidated in this one man. And those powers are exercised in the dark. If whoever holds power in the Oval Office can serenely wiretap the cell phones of several German chancellors of that or that of the president of Brazil, none of them suspected of being a potential terrorist, what would prevent the leaders of Russia, China, Indonesia, Venezuela or Burundi from using similar tactics? Celestine asks. He writes of the new democratic totalitarianism and the riot democracies, démocratie de l'émeute, as French President Emmanuel Macron referred angrily to the Yellow Vest movement, are fueled by economic and identity fears. The great discordance, the paradoxical gap between secular improvements in democratization and economic well-being and the still high levels of citizen anger and disillusion around the world. Discusses the global unsustainable democratic deficit, explores its foundations from the original sins of democracy to today's democratic trilemma, the impossibility of building democratic systems which are ethical, based on efficient political institutions and universal suffrage. The planet is filled with rage and anger. The new economy of anger and discontent levels around the world are high, despite the fact that most available indicators of political and economic progress are better than they've ever been. Just look at the deep trend as measured by empiricists. Global happiness should be on the rise, perhaps even exponentially. Others have attributed recent turmoil to the exponential development of technology in the age of enhanced globalization. Plato noted in the Republic that democracies emerge as a result of discontent with oligarchy, but he quickly warned that democracies are susceptible to tyranny of the majority and rule by demagoguery. Trivial fact that few candidates would be elected to high office in any advanced democracy by campaigning on a fully truthful platform about the policies they actually intend to implement if elected. So, very interesting essay. And then I came across this. Why do some British people not like Donald Trump? Nate White wrote the following response. We like a laugh, and while Trump may be laughable, he has never once said anything wry, witty, or even faintly amusing. Not once ever. Trump, it's a fact, he doesn't even seem to understand what a joke is. His idea of a joke is a crass comment, an illiterate insult, a casual act of cruelty. Trump is a troll, and like all trolls, he is never funny and he never laughs. He only crows or jeers. Very interesting article, worth reading in full. Fascinating article in the Financial Times about Neil Woodford, the inside story of his rise and dramatic fall. The Crazy Bear in Stadhampton, an hour's drive from London, was the perfect setting to celebrate Britain's most successful investment company launch. Garish chandeliers hung between wooden beams as guests jostled for space among the ice buckets filled with magnums of champagne. At the centre of the bar was Neil Woodford, the UK's best-known stock picker. By his side was Craig Newman, his ambitious business partner and minder. Giddy optimism filled the air. Things got really out of control. People were absolutely hammered, says one person who was there. Party carried on until 4 a.m. Hours later, police were called to the Woodford offices in a dreary business park on the outskirts of Oxford. A senior employee, still heavily intoxicated, was seen driving his car around the car park. The police arrested Grant Wenzel, Woodford's head of trading, who had been behind the wheel. Early years, he established his reputation as a contrarian fund manager who took bold bets on unloved companies. Savers who invested £1,000 with him in 1988 saw their pots grow to more than 25,000 over 25 years. He then began to distance himself from his trading floor rather than sitting on the same desk with his team and engaging in discussions about markets. Woodford ordered a glass office to be built where he could shut himself off, according to former Invesco colleagues, always a bad sign. Around 2010, Woodford began taking interest in investing in small private companies that offered opportunities for exponential growth. This was a big departure from the large, unfavoured companies on which he had built his reputation. Having more than £30 billion at his disposal, writing large cheques to back a handful of moonshot bets seemed a gamble worth taking. Then he breaks away from Invesco to set up his own business. The money gushes in. Newman's violent transparency policy, a rare approach, later dismantled, that gave clients detailed access to investment information, including the fund's complete list of holdings, would be well received by investors and advisors, as would the business's clear fee structure. Newman and Woodford treated themselves. Woodford bought himself a Ferrari. This is not a fucking control environment. This is about giving Neil the freedom he did not have at Invesco, Newman told a colleague at the time. For the next 2 years, Woodford's business boomed. In the first 12 months, his main fund equity income returned 20%, making it one of the best performing funds focused on UK stocks. Equity income soon overtook Woodford's former main fund at Invesco, reaching £6.7 billion in July 2015. He launched a listed investment trust known as Patient Capital, which aimed to back mainly small companies with the potential for exponential growth, attracting £800 million at launch. It was the UK's biggest ever fundraising for an investment trust. A key reason to do it was to satisfy Neil's desire, says a former colleague. It's his guilty pleasure to do these unquoted deals, to be the big man. I've got a massive checkbook. I'm going to write something that is going to change your world. It's well worth reading in full. Looking back, the summer of 2017 was the high point for Woodford Investment Management. The business has attracted £15 billion from investors just under half the total Woodford had managed at Invesco. You have to have a sufficiently strong, arrogant gene to back your judgment, back your conviction. If you didn't, you would end up with a portfolio that looks very much like the index. But equally, you must have the humility to accept that you will get things wrong. The fund was hit by a series of blow-ups. Chief among them was Prothena, a US biomedical company that Woodford owned a third of, which was valued at £1.5 billion. In April 2018, the business reported the failure of a major clinical trial, and within an hour of the market opening, its share price had nosedived 70%. So that's just an incredible Icarus-type story. Let's move on to the currency markets. Euro dollar 111.44. Dollar index 97.284, Japanese yen 108.55, Swiss franc 0.9866, the pound 129.50, the Australian dollar 0.6873, India rupee 70.8458, South Korean won 11.7034, Rial 4.1284, Egyptian pound 16.2096, and the rand 14.76. Dollar index, last time I looked, 97.284. This is a chart from the market here. We're really at an important level. Euro dollar, this is from FX Pip Titan, last trading at 111.44. Let's see how things turn out from here. Commodity markets, gold, this is a chart from Chi Girl, who says that we're at risk of falling sharply lower. Crude oil, $53.42. It's not trading well, but I'm actually bullish about it. I think we're going at least 10% higher over the next couple of months. I came across this from Frontline PBS on the President's Orders, Duterte. You've got to watch it, it's frightening. IMF came out with a Sub-Saharan African Regional Economic Outlook, navigating uncertainty. Economic growth projected to be lower than previously envisaged, 3.2% in 2019 and 3.6% in 2020. There's always a bias to upshift the future projection, isn't there? Growth is forecast to be slower than previously envisaged for about 2/3 of the countries in the region. Downward revision reflects a more challenging external environment, continued output disruptions in oil exporting countries, and weaker than anticipated growth in South Africa. Growth is projected to remain strong in non-resource intensive countries, averaging about 6%. As a result, 24 countries, home to about 500 million people, will see their per capita income rise faster than the rest of the world. Growth is expected to move in slow gear in resource intensive countries. External headwinds have intensified. Risk of rising protectionism, a sharp increase in risk premiums, or reversal in capital flows. Talking about climate shocks, security challenges, and the potential of the spread of the Ebola outbreak beyond DR Congo. In addition, fiscal slippages, including those ahead of elections in some countries, and a lack of reform in key countries. Policymakers had limited room for manoeuvre to counter external headwinds, they said. They speak of 20 million net new entrants poised to join labour markets every year, and elevated balance sheet vulnerabilities in many countries. Putin is hosting a big Russia-Africa conference. He kicked off by saying this, typical Putin: "We see how an array of Western countries are resorting to pressure, intimidation, and blackmail of sovereign African governments." Signals Russia's return to Africa with the summit. 35 African countries, heads of states, are expected for the first Africa-Russia summit in the Black Sea resort of Sochi, which starts tomorrow and ends on Thursday. The heads of some 35 African countries are expected for the first Africa-Russia summit in the Black Sea resort of Sochi next Wednesday and Thursday. Russia has always been present in Africa, and this is a very important continent, Putin's spokesman Dmitry Peskov said ahead of the summit. Remnants of that influence remain, from the Kalashnikov rifle on the flag of Mozambique to the Angolan flag with its hammer and sickle style gear and machete. Egyptian President and African Union Chairman Abdel Fattah el-Sisi, who Putin has fostered as an ally, will co-chair. This forum signals Russia's decisive pivot towards Africa, said Yevgeny Korendyasov. With varying degrees of success, Moscow is attempting to mobilize its Cold War era connections and convert its old ideological links into business. Struck a series of military agreements with African countries and thousands of private Russian security contractors, many of them with experience fighting in eastern Ukraine and Syria, are reported to be working on the continent. Mercenaries from the Wagner Group, in Libya, Russian contractors fighting on the side of military commander Khalifa Haftar. Mozambique, they're helping the government fight jihadists. Russian fighters have been spotted in Sudan and Madagascar. Late last month, a giant Antonov, an AN-124 military transport plane, landed at an airstrip on Mozambique's northern coast, writes the Globe and Mail. Over the next few hours, as revealed by photos on social media, workers unloaded the plane's cargo, army truck, other equipment, all to supply the estimated 160 Russian military contractors that have arrived in northern Mozambique to fight an Islamist insurgency, latest sign of Russia's expanding influence in Africa. Russia says it will offer a win-win relationship with African leaders at the Sochi summit. Russia's trade with Africa has tripled over the past decade, reaching $20 billion last year. Its interests in Africa are vast: nuclear energy deals in Nigeria and Egypt, platinum mining in Zimbabwe, diamond mining in Angola, oil exploration in Ghana and Algeria, gas projects in Cameroon and Nigeria, hydropower in Tanzania, arms exports in Uganda and Egypt, and units of mercenary soldiers in Sudan, Libya and the Central African Republic. And Russia could soon acquire its first African military base. It has been in talks with Sudan about a possible naval base on the Red Sea. We are prepared to propose to our African colleagues and friends a broad agenda of equal interaction covering many different areas: economy, energy, transport, education and environment. October 2015, on the occasion of his intervention in Syria, I called him a geopolitical grandmaster. December 2016, I characterized a parabolic Putin rebound. That was on the occasion of his interference in the US election. I said so much has happened in 2016, from the Brexit vote to President-elect Trump, and it certainly feels like we have entered a new normal. One common theme is a parabolic Putin rebound. At this moment, Putin has Fortress Europe surrounded, the intellectual father of the new zeitgeist that propelled Brexit, Le Pen, the Five-Star Movement in Italy, Geert Wilders in the Netherlands, is Vladimir Putin. In the Middle East, I wrote, it is Putin who is calling the shots, and that is further confirmed by recent events. But in this particular article in 2016, I was saying my starting point is the election of President Trump, because hindsight will surely show that Russia ran a seriously sophisticated program of interference, mostly digital. There's a link to the Summit and Economic Forum, Russia-Africa for Peace, Security and Development. Africa matters more to Russian exporters than to Chinese exporters, or Indian or Brazilian. If we look at exports divided by GDP, 1.1% of Russian GDP is linked to exports to Africa versus 0.8% of Chinese GDP. For the first time since it won independence from Britain in 1966, Botswana faces a genuine electoral contest on Wednesday. This is where the previous president, Seretse Khama, is supporting the opposition. Barrick Gold agrees to pay $300 million to end Tanzania dispute. As part of the deal, which still must be approved by Tanzania's Attorney General, the government will be given a 16% stake in a renamed company known as Twiga Minerals Corp, Barrick said Sunday. Rebuilding these operations after 3 years of value destruction will require a lot of work, but the progress we've already made will be greatly accelerated by this agreement. Mark Bristow, Barrick's Chief Executive Officer. The point is, if you've got investments in country and then you're being extorted, you've got to make a calculation as to what the stop loss is costing you. The problem with this is 300 million is a lot of money. Congratulations to President Magufuli, but the issue is there any other company that could persuade its board to now start a project in Tanzania? No, there isn't. Ethiopia Telecom Q1 revenues up 21%, showing healthy growth. Revenue was $343 million, subscriber numbers up 10% to 44.45 million. Congo's enormous rainforest is getting smaller. The Congo Basin rainforest is the second biggest tropical forest in the world after the Amazon, shrinking fast. Between 2001 and 2018, Congo lost 13 million hectares of tree cover, around 6% of the entire rainforest. Nature has made my country the depository of 47% of the continent's forests, said Tshisekedi. Until more jobs are created and governance improves, Congo's trees will continue to go up in smoke. I wrote about this in September 2019 when I was saying Greta Thunberg was referencing the feedback loop and the risks of dieback, where we enter a phase of cascading system collapse. Angola eyes return to Eurobond market to help fund budget gap. Last tapped the international markets in May 2018 when it sold 30-year securities paying 9.375%. They're currently yielding 8.85%. Currency has been devalued sharply this year, a total of about 30%, which is second only to Argentina's peso as they try to narrow the unofficial and the official rate. South African all shares up 6.4% this year. This chart shows which countries will contribute the most to global growth this year. Interesting that Egypt will contribute 1.5%. Egyptian pound 16.21. EGX 30 up 8.77% year to date. Nigeria all share down 16.04% year to date. Ghana Stock Exchange down 13.61% year to date. Liberia, with a GDP of just $2.1 billion, is one of the largest seagoing fleets in the world. Over 4,400 vessels, about 12% of global shipping fly its flag. They earn about $20 million a year from the registry. The English words goober, zombie, and probably funk all have their roots in Kikongo, one of the national languages of the DR Congo. Linguistics, wonderful to study. Bank stocks are up about $210 million since the rate cap review push, predictably. If you want to look into any banking stock in the NSE, the link is towards the end of Rich wrap-ups. Nairobi all share up 5.65% year to date. The recent boost has come from the banking sector. NSE 20 is down 13.17% year to date. Thank you for stopping by.